Hey guys, it's Gemma from ASD Rocks. I was asked to do something about how we currently are scoring children with autism. So we used to go in Australia. I wasn't going to do it, and then because initially when I started ASD Rocks, it was about helping parents in Australia manage to create, to understand their kids and create a more loving environment, or a more supportive environment where their kids could thrive. And then Australia changed from using the CARS score, which was a phenomenal way of making a diagnosis, into and then they bunched that into what we call levels, and we only have 3 levels of autism. So they really took the incredible variety that we had in autism being on a scale and stuffed it into 3 sections of can, cannot, and sometimes can. So I'm going to explain this to start with the CARS score, and I also have here a piece of paperwork in Australia. If you are in a country that still uses the CARS score, I'm going to explain that, and hopefully you will get a really good understanding of how your child is given a diagnosis, and hopefully that the CARS score will never ever go away, and you will never be replaced with something as pitiful as what bunching something so varied, agreed to be so varied as autism, and a scale of, or a spectrum of autism, into a 1, 2, or 3. So the CARS is basically, the way it works is it's a test, which is, I've been printing stuff out for you guys. I must have left it. So it's a score that's given, usually you would go to a pediatrician, a developmental pediatrician, someone like that, and they are going to look at specific areas of your child. So these areas are going to include relating to people, imitation, emotional response, body use, object use, adaptation to change, visual responses to things, listening, responding, taste, smell, touch, and use responses. So when they say use responses and use responses and object use, so the question really ultimately comes down with, go Finn, when you give a child a car, okay, and we're talking a small child, between the ages of 12 months to 2 years, even older, they will recognize it as a car. Most children will brum, brum, brum. On the autism spectrum, especially in my case, in my son's case, this was never used as a car. It was used as something that you could, God, go Finn, line up. I don't know if he's got any other cars here. But he would, anything that he could have, he would sort of line them up, and you would find these huge long lines of things. They weren't used as cars. He never picked up any of that imaginary play, that brum, 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 never ever did anything like that. So when we talk about response of use, and we talk about object use, we're talking about whether that, not whether they can pick it up and hold it. It's not a motor skill thing. We're talking, are they using those things the way they were intended to be used? That's a really big thing. So taste, smell, touch, response, and use, fear or nervousness, verbal communication, non-verbal communication. We've covered verbal and non-verbal communication in a lot of other vlogs, so if you're not sure, just get on and have a look. Activity level. So activity level will include not necessarily you know, with other people. It's not about activity level interacting. Intellectual response, and then there'll be general impressions. Now, the score goes from, I think it starts between 15 and it goes to 60. So as someone, as a pediatrician is, oh, Finn, your desk is amazing. As a pediatrician is sitting down with your child, they will have the CARS score sheet with them, and they'll be marking a number. So, for example, relating to people. One of the biggest things that that happened when we first went to see the great and powerful Richard Eisenmeyer, who I am forever thankful for helping me to understand the world of autism, because if he hadn't helped me understand the world of autism, Bo wouldn't be where he is, you know. So it was the first time I had booked in to see him, and he came out into the reception, and Bo was sitting there and playing with one of those wooden sort of puzzles where you push the shapes across and they go through loops, and he was sitting there like that, and Richard walked out and he took one look at Bo, and then he took one look at me, and then he looked at Bo and he said, "We'll just take that in with us, shall we?" I was like, this guy gets it, right? This guy gets it. He's settled, he's playing, he would be happily playing with that for the next 3 hours. Now, I've also made a video about the fact that Bo was born autistic, and he was so completely within his bubble that he didn't relate to people at all. In fact, he didn't even notice if people walked in the room. He didn't notice if you called him by his name. So, you know, you'd get a high score between 15 and 60 for Bo on that in that way. Imitation, again, we're talking about imitating things like play, car. They may have a few things around that they, you know, imitate with. Kids always imitate. In fact, oh my God, if you just watch that video where my heart got broken because I was with this most amazing, beautiful baby boy, and he was imitating me. I was going, oh, and he was going, oh, you know, and we were just playing and communicating, and it was all imitation. I'd go, look up there, look at this, and he would go, oh, you know, it was, and Bo was never like that. It's not about pointing. This is really important, guys. This isn't about pointing. Bo pointed, you know, but imitation of, you know, peekaboo. As you may have seen in some of Bo's earlier videos, I think in the 0 to 2 year category, Bo not only does not imitate me when we sing the song Clap, Clap, Clap Your Hands, but he makes me clap for him. He takes my hands and claps. He doesn't clap himself. So imitation. So again, you would get quite a high score if you're not getting any response. Again, adaptation to change. Not so great. So the way that this, I've done a little drawing for you so you can understand it. Understanding that, I've written 0 here, but it's not, it's 15. That we start at 15. So you start at 15 and you go to 60. Okay, now the idea is that anything sort of below 15, 15 is what we would consider typical, atypical human being. Understanding that there are the opposites of autism. So from 0 to 15 would be, you know, a very low score might indicate that you have a child that has something else, not autism, that needs to be looked into, but isn't within that autism spectrum. So 15, the way I've done it is that 15 to 30 is what we would call, so you or I or any person that is considered a typical person. This is not about ADHD. This is not about GDD and OS. This is not about, right? This is an autism spectrum, right, scale. and it goes from 15 to 30. Now, 30 is where you really start worrying. Anything between 50 and 30, where it's you and I, we all talk about, oh, you know, everyone's got a little bit of autism. I don't necessarily agree with that. I agree that we all do have specific things within us that, or characteristics that are similar. Some of us are more obsessive compulsive than others, but it doesn't mean that we're autistic. Some of us are more, social than others, and you might have a quite shy personality type. It doesn't mean that you're non-verbal. You know, if I can't dance, it doesn't mean I've got a little bit of paraplegia. It means, you know, I can't dance. So it's really important to understand that this scale here will trigger up on regular people, a little bit of OCD going on there, needs routine, listening responses. Who do we know out of how many typical people that just don't have great listening responses? So this 15 to 30 is your typical, and then anywhere from 30 to 60. Now that's a big scale, and that's why I sort of wanted to point out that it's a scale. It's not just, you know, this straight line heaving up. 30 to 60 is a really big scale, and that's where you get your CARS score, okay? So CARS stands for Children Autism Rating Scale. That's all it is. Children Autism Rating Scale. Where does my child from 30, where we hit a diagnosis? So if you're at 29, okay, maybe you're having difficulties with speech and you need speech therapy, but it may not necessarily be due to an autism diagnosis. It may have some other things that are going on. There may be cognitive issues. You may have behavioral issues in a child. It may not be autism, okay? So 30, once we get to 30, that's where we really hit, okay, you are now ticking all of these points within the autism spectrum. Okay, so 30 to 60, we then end up with your 60 would be your completely nonverbal, completely zero life skills, no communication, verbal or nonverbal, inability to manage change, most likely requiring something like 24-hour help and care, no toileting, feeding and those sorts of things, right up through to the age. There's no age group here, although the CARS score is specifically for children. As we all know, autism doesn't just go away. You can certainly work with things, but when you ended up with a 60 100 years ago as a child, a lot of those kids would be just turfed into a sanitarium and they'd stay there chained to a wall and they'd stay at a 60. We now know that whereas a 3-year-old may score here and then with work may end up down here with early intervention, or may score quite high, but with intensive programming we can alter certain behaviors with what we know works, this early intervention and this extra care, extra love, extra time, extra patience, extra explaining. Okay, so that is the CARS score. So if you have a child that rests on the CARS, if you're in a country and you're getting a pediatrician or a diagnosis and your country uses the CARS scale, which was a global scale and it was a brilliant scale, this is what you're looking at. This is what you're looking for. So any child that scores between 20 to 30, okay, you may not get a diagnosis of autism, but you may have something else going on there, and that's up to the pediatrician. Then you don't be fixated on going to get my diagnosis of autism, there may be loads of stuff out there that you hadn't considered that it could very well be. And a proper diagnosis, over labeling is really